Yes, what I mean is like it can't be like a coincidence that all of the wealth that they seek is in Islamic states. Like there is oil, as you say, oil is important, but there is also oil in different countries in the world.
But the vast majority of oil reserves are here in this region. And this is extremely important. This makes this region extremely important. But I want to also look at American foreign policy. The friends of yesterday are today's enemy. The Americans supported the Mujahideen in order to attack the Soviet Union. They gave them arms, they gave them wealth, they opened the door for them, and they became strong. They didn't need them anymore. They became their enemies today. Those Islamist Shiites in Iraq, who are allies of the United States in Iraq today, only a couple of years back, were the enemy of the United States of America.
Okay, Anas Al-Tikriti, you wanted to come in here.
There is a problem within the West in regards with when the rhetoric that we emit, we broadcast, contains Islamic references. The liberation efforts and the such are fine, as you said, although I also have my reservations regarding that. But the problem is this interlinking, interrelationship between Islam and politics, Islam and these liberation movements. I think that we have tried, and this is where I say that we have been failed time and time again. The media is part of it, but it's not just the media. There is a predominant ideology there that wishes to
get back to the motion
than the moderate mainstream. The issue is that we, as Muslims, the vast majority of the Muslim public, whether the Arab world or beyond, have chosen to exercise politics with the Islamic reference. Now, if it's going to be rejected, then I'm sure that we're going to be in for this.
Okay, let me take a question from the lady up there.
It may be that the intention of this war is not exactly a war on Islam itself. Maybe not the intention. But the fact is that many Muslims, many women that wear hijab, and many men that have beards in the United States or in other Western countries feel discriminated against and feel as if they're named just because they're Muslim, that they're discriminated against and that they should be out of this country. I know, family relatives who had to leave the United States for this reason because they're discriminated against just because of the hijab or, their beards.
How do you answer that?
The underlying question you point out is an important one. And that is the difference between perception and reality. What we've tried to show thus far is that what drives U.S. policy is not anti-Islam as such. Are there certain individuals, perhaps individuals in positions of influence who have a fear of Islam? No doubt about it. But you have to look at the preponderance of evidence. The preponderance of evidence, the preponderance of what the U.S. policy is driven by very clearly indicates that there is not hostility to Islam as such, but things that are offensive to Islam that are that.
Okay, let me ask the question.
Is there a perception in the Muslim world that there is? Yes, there is. But perceptions are not reality, and it's very important for us to advocate against that linkage, because we can make this a war of religion.
Let's ask the question of whether she accepts what you've been saying.
Okay, so you're saying you agree that the perception of the world is that, for example, the woman wearing the hijab is discriminated against. If these people are being discriminated against, does that not mean that this is a war on Muslims? Therefore, if it's a war on Muslims, it's a war on Islam. How do you define that in the United States or in other Western countries?
Well, that's too simplistic, because even the Muslims in France, for instance, supported the government in its position. The issues within these particular nations, they didn't want the interference of outside of non-Muslims on this internal issue between French Muslims and their government. There is an issue of how to integrate Muslims within Western societies, and that is part of what we have to do. But the big important point, which we really have to remember very much, is that we can shape this war the way we want. If we are more proactive, if Muslims are more proactive, if they are able to advocate their issues well in Washington, D.C., and be stronger in our lobbying capacity, we can shape this war. If we allow this to slip into a religious war, it is going to be dangerous.
Okay, gentleman at the back.
My question is, would the Western reaction to the atrocities of 9/11 and Madrid have been less forceful had it not been a Muslim faction that had accepted responsibility for these acts?
Grand Mufti, do you want to take that question?
I think that even before 11th of September, and Madrid and Holland, I think some Muslims would complain. But the 11th of September gave the courage to other people around the world to somehow develop something against Muslims and Islam that we didn't see before. Let me.
So you think people are using that as a pretext to attack Muslims?
Probably. Most of, especially those dictators around the world that wanted to please the President Bush's determination to go after those who have committed this terror or terrorism in New York and in Washington. And then, unfortunately, I think that President Bush apologized later on when he used the term crusade. I know that for many Christians the crusade means good things, a lot of good things, crusade for education, other things. But for Muslims it means only one thing, the war against Islam and Muslims. In the same way as the jihad for Muslims means many good things. But for the Christians and Jews and others, non-Muslims, jihad means only one thing, violence against them.
Okay,
so
my
proposal is that we should avoid using both crusade and jihad in order to avoid the embarrassment of all.
You're going to impose that in Bosnia. You have the
we are imposing already.
You're imposing it already.
Yes.
Okay, are you satisfied with the answer you had?
Not really. If it had been North Korea that had done the attacks on 9/11, it would have just been just as forceful an act against that country as any other. And it's not just solely because there's this perceived disdain for Islam in America and Western countries.
You want to come back to that?
No.
Can I ask the gentleman a question? Do you realize that the vast majority, if not every single Muslim state, condemned outrightly 9/11? In fact, indeed, including the Taliban government themselves? Does it make a difference in our perception, in our minds, that every single mainstream Muslim organization living in the Muslim world as well as the West has condemned time and time again for the past 4 years 9/11, and they will continue seemingly to do so for the next 10 or 15 years?
Gentleman towards the back there.
The question is, what if I was a citizen of Turkey? How would I feel if my country was not allowed to enjoy the benefits of the European Union just because the majority of its members are Muslims?
Well, certainly that is we agree with you, and we agree with the position of Mustafa Cheric on the fact that the perception in much of the Muslim world is that the reason why Turkey is not admitted into the European Union is because it is an Islamic nation.
It may well be admitted into the European Union.
It may well be yet. So but the fact of them
about Turkey, it's very interesting, and I think it's proof to our motion. And that is because those who accept Turkey are saying it's left behind Islam, and those who are rejecting Turkey, it's saying it hasn't left Islam enough. So in either case,
I don't think that's the argument of everybody, that it's left behind Islam. That it's a bridge between Islam and the rest of Europe. A lot of people are citing that as a reason.
That's a very minute element, and I wish that they would have bigger microphones in front of them when they speak.
Gentleman wants to come back.
The fact of the matter is,
let the questioner.
2 points.
Could we just let the questioner come back here, because he just wants to make another point.
I do realize that in time Turkey will hopefully get accepted to the European Union because it is just decision. The fact that it has not been for so many years been admitted this position just because of the fact it's a majority Muslim country.
It is also its human rights record as well, which has come under a lot of criticism, isn't it?
Excuse me, repeat that?
It's also its human rights record which has received a lot of criticism. That's also been cited by those who oppose Turkey's membership into the European Union. You have to acknowledge that.
I certainly do. But what about the Pope's statement? How do we comment on that?
Which one?
As Dr. Serch has pointed out, that Turkey should not be accepted because it's a Muslim country. And in fact, I don't realize this. Turkey is not declared as a Muslim country.
You wanted to make a point.
Yes, 2 points. First of all, that the question on Turkey's admission to the European Union is not yet a closed story. And point number 2, it's not relevant to our discussion on the war on terror.
Exactly.
The war on terror is a war, as we have described, consisted of 2 parts, broadly. The war on 2 fronts. In Afghanistan, as Ramzi pointed out, this war was supported by Yasser Arafat, by the Iranians, by the vast majority of the Muslim nations. The second leg of the war on terror, namely the occupation of Iraq, is again not a war against Islam as Muslims, because the end result is that, in fact, the Islamist groups in Iraq today are partnering with the United States. So the proposition of this debate tonight